My friend, I want to share with you a story that changed the entire trajectory of my life, and perhaps if you allow it, will change yours as well. It was 1908, and I was a young reporter barely scraping by in the coal regions of Virginia when I was assigned to interview the great Andrew Carnegie. I expected a simple newspaper story, maybe a few quotes about his steel empire, perhaps some advice for young entrepreneurs. What I received instead was a commission that would consume the next 20 years of my life and reveal the secrets that separate the successful from the struggling masses. Carnegie looked at me across his mahogany desk in his Pittsburgh mansion, his steel gray eyes studying me with the intensity of a man who had built an empire from nothing. The room was thick with the smell of Cuban cigars and the weight of decisions that had shaped nations. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Young man, I've spent my life studying what makes men rich, not just in money, but in purpose, in power, in the ability to shape their destiny according to their will." He paused, letting those words settle into my consciousness like seeds in fertile soil. Then he continued, "I want you to interview 500 of the most successful people in America and distill their secrets into a philosophy that any man can follow. Will you accept this commission?" I was 25 years old, broke, and completely unprepared for what would become the most important work of my life. But something in his voice, something in the way he looked at me, told me this was my moment of destiny. I said yes, not knowing that this single decision would lead me into the inner circles of the most powerful men in America. But here's what Carnegie didn't tell me that day. What I discovered only through years of intimate conversations with men like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Theodore Roosevelt, John D. Rockefeller, Alexander Graham Bell, and Woodrow Wilson was that most men live their entire lives without ever learning the fundamental lessons that would set them free. They work from dawn to dusk. They struggle against circumstances. They hope for better days. They dream of success, but they remain trapped in invisible patterns that guarantee mediocrity. They follow the crowd when they should lead, seek approval when they should command respect, work harder when they should work smarter, and wonder why success seems to elude them like smoke through their fingers. Over the next 2 decades, I conducted more than 25,000 interviews. I sat in the private studies of railroad barons, in the laboratories of inventors, in the boardrooms of industrialists. I witnessed the decision-making processes that built fortunes and shaped history. I observed the daily habits, the mental disciplines, the relationship patterns that separate the extraordinary from the ordinary. And through it all, 7 fundamental lessons emerged. Lessons that every successful person had mastered, but that society will never teach you in school, in church, or in polite conversation. Because if every man knew these truths, if every person understood these principles, the existing order would crumble, and the world would be a very different place. Today, I'm going to share these 7 life lessons with you in their raw, unfiltered form. These aren't pleasant platitudes or comfortable encouragements. These are the hard truths that will either liberate you from mediocrity or leave you exactly where you are. The choice is yours. Lesson 1. Your environment is your destiny. The first lesson I learned from my interviews with America's greatest achievers was perhaps the most shocking to my young mind. You are not an independent being making independent choices. You are the product of your environment, and your environment is shaping your destiny more powerfully than your willpower ever could. This was a hard truth for me to accept. Like most young men, I believed I was the captain of my own ship, that my thoughts were purely my own, that my decisions flowed from some inner wellspring of independent judgment. But Andrew Carnegie shattered this illusion during our very first conversation. He said, "Hill, let me show you something that will change how you see human nature forever. Show me a man's 5 closest associates, and I'll predict his future with mathematical accuracy. Show me the books on his shelf, the conversations he tolerates, the voices he hears most often, and I'll tell you exactly where he'll be in 10 years, not because I'm a prophet, but because I understand the law of environmental influence." Carnegie then walked me through his own life as an example. He showed me how he had systematically, deliberately, ruthlessly selected every element of his environment: His choice of associates wasn't based on friendship or comfort. It was based on their ability to elevate his thinking and challenge his limitations. I don't surround myself with yes men, he explained. I surround myself with men who think bigger than I do, who see possibilities I might miss, who refuse to accept the limitations that others call realistic. My environment isn't accidental, it's architectural. You see, every word you speak, every belief you carry, every standard you live by, none of these originated purely from within you. They were absorbed, downloaded, repeated, and installed through the invisible process of environmental conditioning that began the moment you drew your first breath. Your mother's tone when she spoke about money, your father's posture when he discussed his work, your teacher's expectations when they looked at your potential, your friends' casual comments about success and failure, your community's unspoken rules about what was possible for someone like you. All of this became the programming that now runs your subconscious mind, determining your decisions, shaping your reactions, and ultimately controlling your destiny. Henry Ford understood this principle better than perhaps any man I studied. When I interviewed Ford at his Dearborn estate, he told me something that revolutionized my understanding of human achievement. Hill, I didn't just happen to become successful. I didn't stumble into wealth. I deliberately, systematically, ruthlessly selected my environment, and my environment selected my future. Ford explained how he had refused to allow small minds in his circle. He wouldn't tolerate rooms that breathed fear or scarcity. He surrounded himself with visionaries, with men of action, with builders who thought in terms of possibilities rather than limitations. I choose my friends the way I choose my tools, Ford said. Each one must serve a specific purpose in helping me build what I'm building. If they don't sharpen my vision, expand my thinking, or strengthen my resolve, they don't belong in my inner circle. But Ford didn't stop there. He showed me how he had reconstructed every aspect of his environment, his physical space, his reading material, his daily conversations, even the music he listened to. Everything was designed to reinforce the identity of the man he was becoming, not the man he had been. This is what I came to call environmental hypnosis. Most men aren't hypnotized by a swinging watch or a stage performer. They're hypnotized by the slow, steady, constant repetition of mediocrity. They're hypnotized by the casual tone of conversations that diminish greatness in the name of being realistic. They're hypnotized by the collective agreement that dreaming big is foolish and that settling for less is wisdom. Your subconscious mind doesn't care whether a voice speaks truth or weakness. It doesn't judge the quality of the input. It simply obeys the quantity. Your subconscious mind doesn't ask, is this true? It only asks, have I heard this enough times to make it real? If the voices around you constantly repeat, be realistic, don't get your hopes up, not everyone can win, you have to be practical, then your subconscious, without drama or warning, begins to obey these commands. The tragedy isn't that these words are spoken. The tragedy is that you begin to speak them too. And once you speak them, you begin to believe them. And once you believe them, you begin to live them. Thomas Edison shared with me a profound insight during one of our late-night conversations in his Menlo Park laboratory. Hill, I protect my thoughts by protecting my proximity. I guard my laboratory not just from industrial spies, but from dream killers, from people who speak the language of limitation instead of the language of possibility. Edison showed me his inner sanctum, a private room where he did his deepest thinking. The walls were covered with inspiring quotations, images of his inventions, and letters from fellow inventors around the world. He had created a physical environment that reinforced his identity as a creator, an innovator, a man who made the impossible possible. One voice speaking impossibility, Edison told me, can contaminate a dozen minds pursuing possibility. I don't allow that contamination in my space, in my thoughts, or in my life. But Edison's environmental control went far beyond his physical space. He was ruthless about the conversations he engaged in, the books he read, the social gatherings he attended. If an experience didn't feed his vision, he eliminated it from his life. Most men, Edison explained, are like plants trying to grow in poisoned soil. They wonder why they're not thriving, but they never examine the environment that's stunting their growth. John D. Rockefeller took this principle even further. When I interviewed him at his estate in Cleveland, he explained what he called the law of environmental osmosis. He said, Hill, just as your body absorbs nutrients from the food you eat, Your mind absorbs its characteristics from the environment you inhabit. If you want to change your mind, you must change your environment. Rockefeller showed me detailed records he kept of his environmental choices. He tracked not just his business associates and personal relationships, but also his reading habits, his physical surroundings, and even his recreational activities. Everything was evaluated based on one criterion. Does this contribute to the man I'm becoming, or does it reinforce the man I used to be? I have no time for neutral influences, Rockefeller told me. Every person, every book, every conversation, every experience is either building my future or maintaining my past. I choose my future. Let me ask you now, slowly, honestly, brutally, who are your 5 voices? Not who you love, not who you feel loyal to, not who has been kind to you, but who are the 5 dominant voices in your life, those who shape your beliefs, reinforce your behavior, and reflect back to you your sense of what's possible. Are these voices speaking the language of expansion or contraction? Are they challenging your limitations or reinforcing them? Are they celebrating your potential or managing your expectations? If you removed those 5 voices from your life tomorrow, would your progress accelerate or collapse? Would your dreams expand or shrink? Would your standards rise or fall? Because here's the truth that will either liberate you or leave you exactly where you are. Your 5 voices are either pulling you toward your future or holding you hostage to your past. There is no neutral ground. There is no middle position. They are either elevating you or diminishing you, inspiring you or hypnotizing you, building you or breaking you down. The men I studied, Carnegie, Edison, Ford, Roosevelt, Rockefeller, they protected their environment like kings protect a throne room. It wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. They understood that greatness is fragile in the wrong environment. No matter how strong your idea, if the room is wrong, it will die. No matter how bold your dream, if the people around you mock it, it will fade. No matter how intense your desire, if the voices around you speak doubt, that doubt will infect your consciousness like a virus. You cannot incubate fire in a bucket of cold water. You cannot grow an oak tree in a desert. You cannot build a fortune in an environment that speaks poverty. You cannot develop confidence in a room full of people who profit from your insecurity. But Theodore Roosevelt understood this principle from his earliest days. When I interviewed him at Oyster Bay, he told me, "Hill, I was born into privilege, but I refused to be imprisoned by it. I could have surrounded myself with men who would have agreed with everything I said, who would have made me comfortable in my limitations. Instead, I chose men who would challenge me, who would push me beyond my comfort zone, who would demand more from me than I demanded from myself." Roosevelt showed me how he had systematically built what he called his council of advisors, not just for business or politics, but for every area of his life. He had men who challenged his physical courage, others who sharpened his intellectual capacity, still others who refined his moral reasoning. A man's environment, Roosevelt explained, is like a sculptor's tool. It shapes you whether you're aware of it or not. The question is, are you being shaped into a masterpiece or a monument to mediocrity? This is why I'm challenging you now to conduct what I call an environmental audit. Take an honest inventory of the 5 people you spend the most time with, the 5 voices you hear most often, the 5 influences that shape your daily thinking. Write down their names, then ask yourself these questions. Do they speak the language of possibility or limitation? Do they celebrate your growth or manage your expectations? Do they challenge your excuses or enable your comfort? Do they see the man you're becoming or the man you've always been? Do they push you toward your potential or pull you toward their level? And here's the most important question of all. If you became exactly like these 5 people, would you be proud of the man you'd become? Because whether you realize it or not, you are becoming like them. Every day, through thousands of micro-influences, their attitudes are becoming your attitudes. Their standards are becoming your standards. Their limitations are becoming your limitations. This isn't theory. This is the law of environmental influence in action. It's as reliable as gravity, as predictable as the sunrise, as certain as the changing seasons. Your environment is your destiny. Change your environment and you change your future. Protect your environment and you protect your potential. Elevate your environment and you elevate your life. The choice is yours. But choose consciously, choose deliberately, choose with the full understanding that the 5 voices you tolerate today will determine the man you become tomorrow. Lesson 2. Hard work alone is not enough. The second lesson that emerged from my research was perhaps the most shocking to my Protestant work ethic sensibilities. The world does not reward effort, it rewards effectiveness. Society has sold you a lie, my friend. From your earliest childhood, you've been told, work hard and you'll succeed. You've been taught that sweat is the currency of success, that struggle is the price of achievement, that if you just put in enough hours, success will inevitably follow. But I've seen millionaires who work 4 hours a day and laborers who work 14 hours a day and die poor. I've witnessed fortunes built by men who never lifted anything heavier than a pen, and empires crumble under the weight of backbreaking effort. The difference isn't in the hours invested, it's in the leverage applied. When I interviewed John D. Rockefeller at his estate in Cleveland, he shared with me an observation that shattered my preconceptions about work and wealth. Hill, I've watched men kill themselves with labor while producing nothing of value. They confuse motion with progress, sweat with success, exhaustion with achievement. They work harder and harder, but they never work smarter. Rockefeller then showed me something that would change my understanding of human productivity forever. He took out a detailed analysis of his daily activities and broke them down into categories: thinking time, decision-making time, relationship-building time, and what he called execution oversight. Notice, he said, that I spend less than 2 hours a day on what most people would call work. The rest of my time is spent on leverage, on activities that multiply my effectiveness rather than just consuming my energy. Rockefeller built his empire not by working harder than other men, but by working smarter. He understood what I came to call the 3 pillars of leverage: people, systems, and capital. First, people. Every empire in history was built by one man who learned to multiply himself through others. Rockefeller didn't try to drill every oil well, refine every barrel, or manage every distribution point. He found the best people for each function and gave them the resources, authority, and incentives to excel. I don't hire hands, Rockefeller told me. I hire minds. I don't buy time, I buy results. I don't manage people. I liberate their potential and reward their performance. Andrew Carnegie took this principle even further. When I interviewed him in his Pittsburgh office, he openly admitted, "Hill, I owe everything I've accomplished to the brains I've gathered from other men. I don't know how to make steel. I know how to organize men who know how to make steel." Carnegie showed me his organizational charts, his partnership agreements, his profit-sharing plans. He had created a system where the success of each individual was directly tied to the success of the whole. Instead of trying to control every detail, he had aligned everyone's interests with his vision. "I'm not the smartest man in my company," Carnegie explained. "I'm the man who was smart enough to hire men smarter than me and create an environment where their intelligence could flourish." But Carnegie didn't stop there. He showed me how he had systematically studied the personalities, motivations, and capabilities of each key person in his organization. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their ambitions, their fears. He could predict their reactions and engineer their motivations. "Most men try to do everything themselves," Carnegie said. "They think delegation is weakness, that asking for help is admission of failure. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The ability to multiply yourself through others is the ultimate test of leadership." Second, systems. A system is simply a repeatable structure that produces a predictable result. It's a way of organizing activities, resources, and people so that the desired outcome happens automatically without constant supervision or intervention. Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing not by hiring more workers or buying more equipment, but by changing the system. When I visited his Highland Park plant, Ford walked me through his revolutionary assembly line process. "Hill," he said, "I didn't invent the automobile. That credit belongs to men like Carl Benz. But I did something more important. I invented a system for producing automobiles efficiently, affordably, and consistently." Ford showed me how he had broken down the complex process of automobile assembly into simple, repeatable steps. Each worker specialized in one specific task, becoming incredibly efficient at that single function. The work flowed from station to station in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Before the assembly line, Ford explained, it took us 12 hours to assemble one automobile. Now we can assemble one every 93 minutes. We didn't work harder, we worked smarter. We didn't add more effort, we added more system. But Ford's genius wasn't just in the mechanical aspects of the system. He had also created systems for quality control, inventory management, worker training, and continuous improvement. Every aspect of his operation was designed to function smoothly, without his constant attention. A good system, Ford told me, makes the right thing the easy thing. It eliminates waste, reduces errors, and multiplies results. Most men work in their business instead of working on their business. They become slaves to their own success. Thomas Edison applied this same principle to the process of invention itself. When I visited his Menlo Park laboratory, Edison showed me what he called his invention factory, a systematic approach to innovation that could produce breakthrough after breakthrough. People think invention is about inspiration, Edison explained. But inspiration without perspiration and organization is just daydreaming. I've created a system for innovation that can produce a minor invention every 10 days and a major invention every 6 months. Edison showed me his research methods, his team organization, his testing procedures, his documentation systems. He had turned creativity into a predictable, manageable process. Gut genius, Edison said, is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, but perspiration without system is just exhaustion. System without inspiration is just bureaucracy. The magic happens when you combine inspiration with systematic effort. Third, capital. This is the most misunderstood form of leverage. Most people think of capital only in terms of money, but true capital includes anything that can be invested to produce a return: time, knowledge, relationships, reputation, and yes, money. J.P. Morgan taught me this principle during one of our conversations in his New York office. Hill, he said, the amateur works for money. The professional makes money work for him. The difference is understanding the nature of capital and how to leverage it for maximum return. Morgan showed me his investment philosophy, his risk management strategies, his methods for evaluating opportunities. He didn't just accumulate wealth, he orchestrated it, deployed it, multiplied it through careful leverage. Money, Morgan explained, is like water. It's most powerful when it's moving, when it's under pressure, when it's directed toward a specific purpose. Money sitting idle is opportunity wasted. Money working intelligently is power multiplied. But Morgan's understanding of capital went far beyond financial resources. He had built enormous capital in terms of relationships, reputation, and specialized knowledge. He could accomplish more with a single phone call than most men could accomplish with years of effort. Your reputation, Morgan told me, is your most valuable capital. Your relationships are your most reliable currency. Your knowledge is your most portable wealth. Money comes and goes, but these forms of capital compound over time. The tragedy is that most men work harder and fall further behind. Their response to every setback is to try harder, to work longer hours, to push themselves to the point of exhaustion. They're like a man rowing harder in the wrong direction. They praise their effort while cursing their results. This is the myth of hard work. It's not that effort is worthless, it's that effort without leverage is waste. It's not that struggle is meaningless, it's that struggle without strategy is suffering. I've seen brilliant men with extraordinary talent and unquenchable work ethic, remain trapped in mediocrity because they never learned to leverage their efforts. They became slaves to their own activity, prisoners of their own productivity. And I've seen average men with modest talent and normal work capacity, build extraordinary lives because they understood the principle of leverage. They didn't work harder, they worked smarter. They didn't do more, they accomplished more. The question isn't how hard are you working, the question is how effectively are you working? Are you building systems or just completing tasks? Are you developing people or just managing activities? Are you creating assets or just earning income? Your results are not tied to how hard you work, they're tied to how wisely you leverage your efforts. And wisdom requires something that exhausted men rarely have: time to think, space to reflect, energy to strategize. This is why I began this lesson with the principle that it's better to think for 1 hour than to labor for 100, because thinking is rare. Strategic thinking is sacred. And the men who make time for it regularly, who carve out hours for reflection, for system building, for relationship development, these men rise not because they work harder, but because they work with leverage. Lesson 3. Not everyone deserves access. The third lesson I learned from America's most successful men was perhaps the most difficult to accept emotionally. Some of the people you love most are the very ones holding you back. This isn't about hatred or betrayal. It's about access. Access is power. Who you allow into your daily life, your thoughts, your energy, your schedule, your vision, this determines your future more than your talent, your education, or your circumstances ever could. Yet most men guard their bank accounts more carefully than they guard their attention. They would never give a stranger the keys to their house, but they allow voices to live rent-free in their subconscious, shaping every decision, dampening every ambition, softening every edge. Theodore Roosevelt taught me this lesson with painful clarity during one of our discussions at his Oyster Bay estate. He said, "Hill, I love my family, but I don't take financial advice from my cousins. I respect my friends, but I don't seek counsel from men who've never built what I'm building. I honor my past, but I don't allow it to dictate my future." Roosevelt then showed me something he called his circles of influence, a deliberate structure he had created to manage the various relationships in his life. He had different people for different purposes, and he was ruthless about maintaining those boundaries. "My hunting companions," Roosevelt explained, "are not my political advisors. My social friends are not my business consultants. My family provides emotional support, but they don't set my professional strategy. I honor each relationship for what it is, not for what I wish it could be." Roosevelt understood that you can love someone deeply and still limit their access. Love isn't the same as proximity. Love isn't the same as influence. Love isn't the same as authority over your decisions. But this lesson goes deeper than just managing relationships. It's about understanding that you will outgrow people who once felt like home. And if you cling to them out of guilt, out of loyalty, out of fear of being alone, you'll decorate your cage with familiar faces, but it will still be a cage. Andrew Carnegie put it this way during one of our late-night conversations: "Hill, I've seen more destinies destroyed by emotional loyalty than by business failure. A man who refuses to outgrow his past will never grow into his future." Carnegie showed me letters he had written to former friends, explaining why he could no longer maintain the same level of relationship. These weren't cruel rejections. They were honest acknowledgments that different paths require different companions. "I don't burn bridges," Carnegie explained. "I simply stop crossing them. I don't reject people. I outgrow them. There's a difference between ending a relationship and evolving beyond it." Carnegie taught me to ask myself a crucial question about every relationship in my life: does this person reflect my past or my future? Are they a mirror of where I've been or a window into where I'm going? The people who knew you when, Carnegie said, are often the last to accept who you're becoming. They have a vested interest in your old identity because your old identity makes them comfortable. Your growth challenges their stagnation. Your progress highlights their paralysis. Henry Ford demonstrated this principle in his business relationships. When I interviewed him at his Dearborn office, he showed me his personnel files and explained his philosophy of relational efficiency. Hill, Ford said, "I evaluate every relationship based on one criterion. Does this person make me better or worse? Does their presence elevate my thinking or diminish it? Does their influence accelerate my progress or slow it down?" Ford had created what he called relationship audits, regular evaluations of the people in his personal and professional circles. He would ask himself, if I spent the next 5 years primarily influenced by this person, would I be proud of the man I'd become? Most men, Ford explained, tolerate relationships that drain their energy, distract their focus, and diminish their vision. They do this out of politeness, out of habit, out of fear of confrontation. But tolerance of mediocrity is intolerance of excellence. Ford showed me examples of relationships he had ended, not out of anger or conflict, but out of strategic clarity. He had systematically removed people from his inner circle who couldn't grow with him, who resented his success, who preferred the comfort of the familiar to the challenge of the possible. "I don't have time for neutral relationships," Ford said. "Every person in my life is either building my future or maintaining my past. I choose my future." But the hardest application of this principle involves family relationships. John D. Rockefeller shared with me one of the most difficult decisions of his life, the decision to limit his father's influence on his business decisions. "My father," Rockefeller explained, "was a good man with a small mind. He thought in terms of survival, not success. He spoke the language of limitation, not possibility. I loved him, but I couldn't allow his fears to become my ceiling." Rockefeller showed me how he had gradually, gently, but firmly established boundaries with family members whose influence was incompatible with his vision. He continued to love them, support them, and maintain relationships with them, but he didn't allow them to shape his decisions or influence his direction. "The most dangerous influences in your life," Rockefeller said, "are often the most familiar ones. They know how to speak to your fears, how to activate your guilt, how to make you feel selfish for wanting more than they think you deserve. This is what I came to understand as the guilt of growth. As you evolve, as you expand, as you elevate your standards and pursue your potential, you will inevitably make some people uncomfortable. Your progress will highlight their stagnation. Your clarity will expose their confusion. Your boldness will reveal their fear. And they will try to pull you back, not out of malice, but out of their own discomfort. They will question your changes, criticize your ambitions, remind you of your past failures, and encourage you to be realistic. Thomas Edison faced this challenge when he began working on the incandescent light bulb. He told me, "Hill, I had friends who thought I was wasting my time, family members who worried about my reputation, colleagues who questioned my sanity. They meant well, but their well-meaning doubts were more dangerous to my success than any technical challenge I faced." Edison had to make a choice: maintain comfortable relationships or pursue breakthrough innovation. He chose innovation, and it cost him some relationships, but it gained him immortality. "You cannot," Edison said, "be both comfortable and great. You cannot please everyone and change everything. You cannot maintain all your old relationships and build a new life. Something has to give, and that something is usually the comfort of familiar voices. Let me ask you now, who drains you and who sharpens you? Not who loves you, not who's known you longest, not who has good intentions, but who actually makes you better. Who challenges your excuses, who celebrates your growth, who speaks life into your vision, who sees the man you're becoming rather than the man you've always been. That's your circle. Everyone else is just a memory, a chapter in your story that's already been written." The hardest part of this lesson is accepting that not everyone can come with you on your journey. Some people are meant to be part of your story, not your destination. Some relationships are meant to be chapters, not the entire book. And if you try to drag unwilling people into your future, you'll either fail to reach your potential or exhaust yourself trying to carry their weight. The choice is yours. Do you want to be loved by everyone or respected by those who matter? Do you want to be comfortable in your relationships or powerful in your impact? Do you want to maintain all your old connections or build meaningful new ones? Because you cannot have both. Growth requires sacrifice. Evolution demands selection. Progress means making choices that will disappoint some people and inspire others. Choose wisely. Choose deliberately. Choose with the full understanding that the people you allow close to you will determine the man you become. Lesson 4. Your mind must be reprogrammed daily. The fourth lesson that revolutionized my understanding of human potential was this: your mind is not naturally programmed for greatness, it's programmed for survival. This revelation came to me during an extended conversation with Thomas Edison in his Menlo Park laboratory. We were discussing the nature of human consciousness when Edison shared an insight that would change my entire approach to personal development. "Hill," Edison said, "the human mind is like a phonograph. It records everything, but it doesn't discriminate between symphonies and noise. It plays back whatever has been recorded most often, regardless of whether that recording serves your highest good." Edison explained that your subconscious mind is wired for one primary function: to keep you alive. It's designed to conserve energy, avoid pain, seek what's familiar, and stay where it's safe. These are survival mechanisms that served our ancestors well, but they can be devastating to anyone who wants to achieve greatness. Unless you actively reprogram your mind, Edison continued, daily, deliberately, systematically, you'll default to patterns you never consciously chose. You'll be controlled by programming that was installed by accident, by circumstance, by other people's fears and limitations. Edison then showed me his laboratory journals, where he recorded not just his experiments with electricity and invention, but his experiments with what he called mental programming. Every morning, Edison spent the first hour of his day in what he called constructive meditation, not emptying his mind, but filling it with specific thoughts, images, and affirmations related to his current projects. I don't just invent machines, Edison explained. I invent the mindset that creates machines. Every morning, I program my subconscious with the problems I want to solve, the innovations I want to create, the future I want to build. This is the power of autosuggestion, the daily conscious repetition of what you choose to become. It's not positive thinking or wishful dreaming. It's the deliberate installation of new programming to replace the old programming that's been running your life. Andrew Carnegie demonstrated this principle through what he called his mental diet. When I interviewed him at his New York offices, Carnegie showed me detailed records of his daily mental inputs. The books he read, the conversations he engaged in, the thoughts he entertained. Hill, Carnegie said, I control my thoughts the same way I control my business, through systematic management. I don't allow random thoughts any more than I allow random expenses. Everything that enters my mind is evaluated based on whether it serves my purpose. Carnegie explained that your subconscious mind is like a fertile garden. It will grow whatever seeds are planted in it, but it doesn't discriminate between productive plants and weeds. If you plant thoughts of limitation, you'll harvest a life of limitation. If you plant thoughts of possibility, you'll harvest a life of achievement. Most men, Carnegie said, have minds full of weeds because they've never learned to be gardeners of their own consciousness. They allow anyone to plant anything in their mental garden, then wonder why they're not harvesting the fruits of success. Carnegie showed me his daily mental programming protocol, which became the foundation for what I would later teach in my books and lectures. Step 1, create your definite major purpose. This isn't just a goal, it's a clear, specific, emotionally charged description of what you intend to accomplish. It must be written down, memorized, and reviewed daily. Step 2, develop your success affirmations. These are specific statements about who you're becoming, written in the present tense, as if they're already true. I am successful. I am wealthy. I am confident. I am a leader of men. Step 3, visualize your success. While repeating your affirmations, create vivid mental images of yourself living the life you desire. See yourself in your ideal environment, surrounded by the people you want to influence, engaged in the work you want to do. Step 4, engage your emotions. Your subconscious mind is most receptive to thoughts that are charged with emotion. Feel the excitement of your success, the gratitude for your achievements, the confidence of your abilities. Step 5, take immediate action. Mental programming without physical action is just daydreaming. Every time you program your mind, you must immediately do something that moves you toward your goal. Henry Ford took this principle even further. When I visited him at his Highland Park plant, Ford showed me what he called his mental factory, a systematic approach to reshaping his consciousness that was as precise and efficient as his automobile assembly line. Hill, Ford said, I treat my mind like I treat my manufacturing process. I don't allow defective parts, I don't tolerate inefficient methods, and I don't accept substandard results. My thoughts are my raw materials, and I'm going to make sure they're the highest quality possible. Ford explained that he had divided his mental programming into 3 distinct phases: demolition, construction, and reinforcement. First, Ford said, I have to demolish the old programming, the limiting beliefs, the fear-based thinking, the small-minded assumptions that were installed in my consciousness before I knew better. This requires conscious effort to identify and reject thoughts that don't serve my purpose. Ford showed me journals where he had written down every limiting belief he had ever held about himself, his abilities, his potential. Then he had systematically challenged each belief, examined its origins, and replaced it with a more empowering alternative. Second, Ford continued, I have to construct new programming, new beliefs, new assumptions, new mental habits that align with the man I'm becoming. This is where autosuggestion becomes crucial. I program my mind daily with the thoughts, images, and feelings that correspond to my desired future. Ford's construction phase involved what he called mental blueprints, detailed descriptions of his goals, his character, his daily habits, and his ultimate vision for his life. He would read these blueprints every morning and evening, visualizing each element as if it were already his reality. Third, Ford explained, I have to reinforce the new programming through consistent action. Every thought I think, every word I speak, every action I take must align with my new mental programming. Otherwise, I'll drift back to the old patterns. This reinforcement phase was what Ford called living your programming. It meant making decisions, forming habits, and taking actions that were consistent with the new identity he was installing in his subconscious mind. John D. Rockefeller shared with me an even more sophisticated approach to mental programming. When I interviewed him at his estate in Pocantico Hills, Rockefeller explained what he called the principle of mental compound interest. Hill, Rockefeller said, most people understand compound interest in financial terms, how a small amount of money invested consistently over time can grow into a fortune. But few people understand that the same principle applies to thoughts. Small thoughts, repeated consistently over time, compound into a transformed consciousness. Rockefeller showed me his mental investment portfolio, a collection of books, quotations, images, and affirmations that he reviewed daily. But unlike other successful men I had interviewed, Rockefeller had created a system for measuring the return on his mental investments. I track my mental progress the same way I track my financial progress, Rockefeller explained. I measure my confidence levels, my decision-making speed, my ability to see opportunities, my capacity to influence others. I can tell you exactly how my mental programming is performing. Rockefeller had developed what he called mental metrics, ways to quantify the effectiveness of his autosuggestion practice. He would rate his daily energy levels, his clarity of thought, his emotional stability, and his sense of purpose. If any of these metrics declined, he would adjust his mental programming accordingly. The subconscious mind, Rockefeller said, responds to consistency more than intensity. It's better to program your mind for 15 minutes every day than for 2 hours once a week. The key is repetition, persistence, and patience. But Rockefeller's most powerful insight was about the relationship between mental programming and physical environment. He showed me how he had arranged his living and working spaces to reinforce his mental programming. Your environment, Rockefeller explained, is constantly programming your subconscious mind. If your physical space contradicts your mental programming, you're working against yourself. Everything you see, hear, and experience should reinforce the identity you're trying to create. Rockefeller had filled his offices and homes with visual reminders of his goals, pictures of his achievements, quotes from great thinkers, symbols of his aspirations. Even his choice of music, art, and literature was designed to support his mental programming. Theodore Roosevelt demonstrated this principle through what he called intellectual combat. When I interviewed him at the White House, Roosevelt explained that he viewed negative thoughts as enemies to be defeated, not merely ignored. Hill, Roosevelt said, you cannot build a positive consciousness by simply avoiding negative thoughts. You must actively combat them. You must engage them in intellectual warfare and defeat them with superior firepower. Roosevelt had developed what he called counter-programming, specific positive thoughts that he would use to attack and replace negative thoughts. When doubt crept into his mind, he would immediately counter it with evidence of his capabilities. When fear arose, he would replace it with memories of his courage. Every negative thought, Roosevelt explained, is an opportunity to strengthen your positive programming. It's like physical exercise. The resistance makes you stronger. The key is to respond quickly, decisively, and with overwhelming force. Roosevelt showed me his mental ammunition, a collection of personal achievements, inspirational quotes, and empowering memories that he could deploy instantly against any negative thought. He had trained his mind to be a fortress against limitation and a launching pad for possibility. This is why daily mental programming is not optional, it's essential. Your mind is being programmed every moment of every day. The question isn't whether you'll be programmed, but who will do the programming, you or your circumstances. Every song you listen to, every conversation you engage in, every book you read, every thought you entertain, all of this becomes code in your subconscious mind. And most people by age 30 are still running code that was installed when they were 13. Their father's doubts, their teacher's limitations, their peer group's mediocrity, their culture's fears, all embedded not through truth, but through repetition. Their father's doubts, their teacher's limitations, their peer group's mediocrity, their culture's fears, all embedded not through truth, but through repetition. This is why repetition is more powerful than reality. Your subconscious mind doesn't ask, is this true? It only asks, have I heard this enough times to make it real? And there, my friend, lies your power. If your subconscious can be programmed by accident, it can be reprogrammed by design. Here's what I call the daily programming protocol. Morning programming, 15-20 minutes. Read your definite major purpose aloud. Repeat your success affirmations with emotion. Visualize your ideal day and ultimate goals. Feel gratitude for your progress and achievements. Take immediate action toward your objectives. Evening programming, 10-15 minutes. Review your day's accomplishments. Identify lessons learned and improvements needed. Repeat your affirmations again. Visualize tomorrow's success. Fall asleep thinking about your goals. Throughout the day, monitor your self-talk and correct negative thoughts immediately. Surround yourself with positive influences and inspiring materials. Take actions that reinforce your new identity. Celebrate small victories and progress. The men I studied, Carnegie, Edison, Ford, Roosevelt, Rockefeller, they all understood that your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. Change your programming, and you change your results. Transform your consciousness and you transform your circumstances. But here's the crucial point. You cannot reprogram your mind once and expect permanent results. Just as you must eat daily to maintain your physical health, you must program your mind daily to maintain your mental strength. The old programming is always trying to reassert itself. The voices of limitation are always trying to regain control. The habits of mediocrity are always trying to pull you back to familiar patterns. This is why consistency is more important than intensity. It's better to spend 15 minutes every day programming your mind than to spend 2 hours once a week. The subconscious mind responds to repetition, not to sporadic effort. Lesson 5. Choose your partner with extreme care. The fifth lesson that emerged from my research was perhaps the most personally challenging. There is no force more quietly influential and dangerously overlooked than the voice of the person you love. This lesson came to me through observing the marriages and partnerships of the most successful men in America. I noticed that behind every great man was not just a woman, but a specific type of woman, one who understood her power to shape her partner's destiny and used that power to elevate rather than diminish his potential. That voice, the voice of your romantic partner, doesn't shout like your critics or compete like your enemies. It whispers softly, daily, constantly, in the quiet moments when your defenses are down and your heart is open. And it's that intimacy, that emotional access, that makes it the most powerful programming force in your life. Andrew Carnegie was unmarried during his years of greatest business expansion, and when I asked him about this, he gave me an answer that shocked me with its honesty. Hill, I've seen more empires destroyed by the wrong woman than by the wrong business decision. The voice closest to you determines your direction more than any strategy, any opportunity, any amount of effort. Carnegie explained that he had deliberately avoided marriage during his empire-building years because he understood that a romantic partner is either a multiplier of your potential or a divider of your focus. There is no neutral ground. A woman's influence on a man, Carnegie said, is like water on stone. It seems gentle, almost imperceptible, but over time it shapes everything. The question is, are you being shaped into a masterpiece or worn down into mediocrity? When Carnegie finally married Louise Whitfield in 1887, at age 51, he chose her not for her beauty or social status, but for what he called her compatible consciousness. Louise believed in his vision before she saw his wealth. She spoke life into his ambitions, not fear into his dreams. Louise, Carnegie told me, doesn't just support my work, she amplifies my vision. When I dream big, she dreams bigger. When I set goals, she holds me accountable. When I face challenges, she reminds me of my capabilities. She's not just my wife, she's my mental partner. Henry Ford demonstrated this principle through his marriage to Clara Jane Bryant. When I interviewed them together at their Dearborn estate, Ford said, "Hill, Clara doesn't just live with me, she lives for our shared vision. She sees the man I'm becoming and speaks to that man, not to the man I was." Clara added, "I married Henry's potential, not his present circumstances. When everyone else thought his automobile ideas were foolish, I believed in his genius. When others called him a dreamer, I called him a visionary." A woman's job isn't to manage her husband's dreams, it's to magnify them. Ford explained that Clara had made a conscious decision to become what he called a success partner rather than just a life companion. She had studied his goals, understood his methods, and aligned her own growth with his vision. "Clara reads the same books I read," Ford said. "She thinks about the same problems I think about. She speaks the same language of possibility I speak. We're not just married, we're synchronized." But Ford also showed me examples of marriages among his business associates where the opposite was true, where well-meaning wives had become anchors of limitation rather than sails of expansion. "I've watched brilliant men," Ford said, "slowly dim their light to avoid outshining their wives. I've seen ambitious men scale down their dreams to match their partner's comfort level. I've witnessed potential greatness die in the comfort of domestic mediocrity." John D. Rockefeller took this principle even further. When I interviewed him and his wife Laura at their estate, Rockefeller explained what he called the principle of partnership evolution. Hill, Rockefeller said, "A successful marriage requires two people who are both committed to becoming more than they were when they met. If one person is growing and the other is stagnating, the marriage will either hold back the growing person or leave behind the stagnating person." Rockefeller showed me how he and Laura had created what they called parallel growth tracks, individual development plans that supported their shared vision while allowing each person to evolve in their own areas of expertise. "Laura manages our philanthropic vision," Rockefeller explained. "She's not just giving away money, she's building institutions that will outlast us both. Her growth challenges my growth. Her excellence demands my excellence. We're not just husband and wife, we're co-architects of a legacy." Laura added, "Too many wives make the mistake of trying to keep their husbands comfortable. But comfort is the enemy of achievement. My job is to keep John growing, challenging himself, reaching for higher levels of impact and influence." Theodore Roosevelt provided perhaps the most dramatic example of this principle. When I interviewed him about his marriage to Alice Hathaway Lee, Roosevelt's voice grew quiet and serious. "Hill," Roosevelt said, "Alice died young, but during our brief marriage, she taught me something invaluable about the power of partnership. She didn't just love me, she believed in my potential to serve something greater than myself. She saw leadership qualities in me that I didn't even know I possessed." Roosevelt explained that Alice had challenged him to think beyond his own comfort, to consider how his abilities could serve the nation. She had planted seeds of public service that would later flourish into his presidency. After Alice died, Roosevelt continued, "I married Edith Kermit Caro, and she continued this legacy. Edith doesn't just support my political career, she shapes my character. She holds me to the highest standards of integrity and service. She's not just my wife, she's my conscience." But Roosevelt also shared with me the painful reality that many marriages become prisons of mutual limitation. He showed me letters from political colleagues whose wives had discouraged their ambitions, questioned their abilities, or simply failed to grow alongside their husbands' expanding roles. "A man's partner," Roosevelt said, "will either call him to greatness or call him to comfort. These are not the same thing. Greatness requires sacrifice, risk, and constant growth. Comfort requires safety, predictability, and stagnation. You cannot have both." Homemade Provide. This is the test I learned to apply to every romantic relationship. Does your partner remind you of who you were or who you're becoming? When you speak of your vision, does she expand it or restrict it? When you face challenges, does she remind you of your strength or your limitations? When you succeed, does she celebrate your achievement or diminish it? Your partner is either a mirror of your growth or a prison of your past. She's either pulling you toward your potential or anchoring you to your current level. She's either speaking life into your dreams or fear into your ambitions. Here's what I discovered. If your partner fears your growth, she will always seek to limit it. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but consistently. She will ask questions designed to plant doubt. Are you sure that's realistic? What if you fail? Don't you think you're taking too big a risk? She will make comments designed to diminish your confidence. You're getting too big for your britches. Success is changing you. You're not the same person I married. She will create comfort designed to satisfy your ambition. You've already accomplished so much. We have enough. Why don't you just be happy with what you have? The most dangerous influence in a man's life is often the most intimate influence. The voice that whispers sweetly in his ear, the presence that makes him feel safe and loved, the relationship that provides comfort and stability. These can become the very forces that prevent him from reaching his full potential. This is why choosing your partner is the most important decision you'll ever make. More important than choosing your career, your investments, or your location, because your partner will influence all of these other choices, and her influence will compound over time. Here's my challenge to you. Evaluate your current relationship or your approach to choosing a relationship based on these criteria. Does she believe in your potential before she sees your performance? Does she speak the language of possibility or the language of limitation? Does she challenge you to grow or enable you to coast? Does she see your vision as exciting or dangerous? Does she want to build something significant together or just be comfortable together? If you're not in a relationship, these questions should guide your selection process. If you are in a relationship, these questions should guide your development process, because relationships, like people, can grow and evolve. The right partner will believe in your dreams before they're proven, challenge your limitations, not reinforce them, celebrate your growth, not fear it, speak life into your vision, not doubt, hold you accountable to your highest potential, grow alongside you rather than resist your evolution. The wrong partner will question your ambitions in the name of being realistic, discourage risk-taking to maintain security, resist changes that threaten her comfort, compete with your purpose for your attention, remind you of your past failures rather than your future possibilities, remain stagnant while expecting you to remain the same. This is not about finding a perfect person. It's about finding a compatible consciousness. It's about choosing someone who shares your commitment to growth, who understands that love means supporting each other's evolution, who sees marriage as a partnership in becoming rather than just a contract for being. The most successful men I studied didn't just happen to have supportive wives. They deliberately chose women who would amplify their potential rather than diminish it. They understood that the voice closest to you becomes the voice inside you, and they were intentional about making sure that voice spoke the language of possibility. Lesson 6. You were not born to be loved. The sixth lesson was perhaps the most liberating and simultaneously the most challenging. You were not born to be loved. You were born to be remembered. This realization came to me through observing a pattern among all the great men I interviewed. Without exception, they had all reached a point in their lives where they had to choose between universal approval and personal achievement, between being liked and being effective, between comfort and greatness, and every single one of them had chosen greatness over approval. From childhood, society programs you to seek approval. You're rewarded for conformity, not creativity. You're praised when you make others comfortable and punished when you make them uncomfortable with your truth. You're taught that being liked is more important than being right, that fitting in is more valuable than standing out. But the men who change the world are not the men who are universally loved. They are the men who are willing to be misunderstood, criticized, even despised in service of something greater than themselves.
Theodore Roosevelt embodied this principle more than any man I studied. When I interviewed him at the White House, Roosevelt said, "Hill, I'd rather be criticized for standing than applauded for kneeling. The man who seeks universal approval will achieve universal irrelevance." Roosevelt explained that early in his political career he had faced a choice. He could take positions that would make him popular with voters, or he could take positions that would benefit the nation. He chose the latter, even when it cost him politically. "I've been called a warmonger for building the Navy," Roosevelt said. "I've been called a socialist for breaking up the trusts. I've been called a radical for conserving natural resources.
But I'd rather be called names for doing what's right than praised for doing what's popular." Roosevelt showed me letters from critics, newspaper editorials that attacked his policies, and political cartoons that mocked his appearance. But he also showed me the results of his presidency, the Panama Canal, the Pure Food and Drug Act, the establishment of national parks and forests. "History," Roosevelt said, "will judge me not by how well I was liked, but by how well I served." And service often requires sacrifice, including the sacrifice of popularity. Thomas Edison faced this same choice in his scientific career. When I interviewed him at his laboratory, Edison said, "Hill, I've been called a fool more times than I can count. Every major invention I've created was initially ridiculed by the experts, dismissed by the press, and rejected by the public." Edison showed me newspaper clippings that mocked his work on the incandescent light bulb, calling it Edison's folly, and predicting that it would never be practical. He showed me letters from fellow scientists who questioned his methods and his sanity. But Edison continued, "I wasn't working for approval, I was working for advancement. I wasn't seeking praise, I was seeking progress, and progress always makes some people uncomfortable." Edison explained that innovation requires deviation from the norm, and deviation from the norm always triggers resistance from those who are comfortable with the status quo. "The moment you stop seeking to be loved," Edison said, "is the moment you start becoming powerful, because power comes from being right, not from being liked." Andrew Carnegie demonstrated this principle in his business practices. When I interviewed him about his labor policies, Carnegie said, "Hill, I've been called ruthless, heartless, and greedy, but I've also created more jobs, paid higher wages, and contributed more to society than my critics combined." Carnegie explained that he had faced a choice between being loved by his workers and being effective as a business leader. He chose effectiveness, implementing policies that were sometimes unpopular but always productive. "I don't need to be loved by everyone," Carnegie said. "I need to be respected by those who matter, and respect comes from results, not from popularity." Carnegie showed me his philanthropic records, the libraries he had built, the schools he had funded, the institutions he had established. His ruthless business practices had generated the wealth that made these contributions possible. "I measure my success," Carnegie said, "not by how many people applaud me, but by how many people I've helped." And helping people sometimes requires making unpopular decisions. Henry Ford took this principle even further. When I interviewed him about his decision to pay workers $5 a day, double the industry standard, Ford said, "Hill, I was criticized by every other manufacturer in America. They said I was setting a dangerous precedent, that I was spoiling the workers, that I would bankrupt the industry." Ford explained that he had ignored the criticism and implemented his policy anyway. The results were revolutionary: reduced employee turnover, increased productivity, and a workforce that could afford to buy the products they were making. "I wasn't seeking approval from other manufacturers," Ford said. "I was seeking results for my company, and sometimes doing what's right requires doing what's unpopular." I was seeking results for my company, and sometimes doing what's right requires doing what's unpopular. Ford showed me letters from business associates who had warned him against his policies, predicting failure and ridicule. But he also showed me his production records, his profit statements, and his employee satisfaction surveys. "The men who criticized me," Ford said, "were protecting their own comfortable mediocrity. They feared that my success would expose their limitations. But I can't let other people's fear determine my actions." This is what I learned from these great men. If you're not being criticized, you're not making a difference. If you're not being questioned, you're not challenging the status quo. If you're not being misunderstood, you're not thinking originally. The approval of the masses is almost always a sign of mediocrity. Because the masses are comfortable with mediocrity, they resist excellence. They prefer the familiar to the innovative, the safe to the bold, the proven to the possible. John D. Rockefeller put it this way, "Hill, I've learned that the same people who criticize your methods will applaud your results. The key is to focus on the results and let the applause take care of itself. Rockefeller showed me how he had systematically ignored criticism while building Standard Oil. He had been called a monopolist, a robber baron, and a threat to free enterprise. But he had also created the most efficient oil distribution system in history, lowering prices for consumers and creating thousands of jobs. I wasn't building a popularity contest, Rockefeller said. I was building an industry. And industries are built by men who are willing to be unpopular in service of progress, Rackles long pausen. But with the Tate would long pausen, Rockefeller said, True volsard of Udabio. Kiva build, ki fensive in yarfa forlibs, at the tirum strength. But because nosta prower, no way rhyme heves and our sapa showes. Could you strengths adhere office, can wasp plater blationer a's, but our rebel wheeled at the case ter clarity our all for a pence, triple is gonna be as old jarash. You be three bro at even an boat late at care. To run because of plebs, medina theory, this is your choice. Do you want to be loved or do you want to be effective? Do you want to be comfortable or do you want to be significant? Do you want to be safe or do you want to be memorable? You cannot have both. Greatness requires sacrifice. Excellence demands deviation. Impact necessitates unpopularity. The men who are remembered by history are not the men who were universally loved in their lifetime. They are the men who were willing to be misunderstood, criticized, even despised in service of something greater than themselves. Abraham Lincoln was hated by half the nation. Jesus Christ was crucified by the crowd. Galileo was condemned by the church. Van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime, but they changed the world. You must learn to navigate rejection without retreat. You must train your spirit to recognize criticism as confirmation that you're moving in the right direction. You must understand that the discomfort of others is often a sign of your own growth. Here's what I want you to understand. The people who criticize your ambitions are revealing their own limitations. The people who question your methods are protecting their own mediocrity. The people who discourage your dreams are defending their own fears. Their opinions are not verdicts on your potential. They're confessions of their own stagnation. You were not born to make everyone comfortable. You were born to make a difference. You were not born to be safe. You were born to be significant. You were not born to be loved by everyone. You were born to be respected by those who matter. And the people who matter, the people who are also committed to growth, excellence, and impact, they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be authentic. They don't need you to be popular. They need you to be purposeful. Choose your audience carefully. Seek the respect of those who are building something significant. Pursue the admiration of those who understand the cost of excellence. Value the approval of those who have earned the right to judge, and let the rest think what they will. Their opinions are not your reality. Their comfort is not your calling. Their limitations are not your ceiling. You were born to be remembered, not loved. Act accordingly. Lesson 7. You must live with urgency. The seventh and final lesson that emerged from my research was perhaps the most crucial. You don't have time. You have only now. This lesson came to me through a profound realization during my interview with Andrew Carnegie. We were discussing his plans for philanthropy when he suddenly stopped, looked at me with intense seriousness, and said, Hill, the greatest enemy of human achievement is not failure, it's the illusion of time. Carnegie explained that most men live their entire lives believing they have decades to become the person they were meant to be. They think there will be other opportunities, other chances, other seasons when they'll finally get serious about their dreams. But time, Carnegie said, is the one resource you can never earn back, never recover, never replace. And while you're waiting for the perfect moment, life is passing you by. Carnegie showed me his daily schedule, his project timelines, his decision-making processes. Everything was designed around what he called the principle of immediacy, the understanding that today's action is always more valuable than tomorrow's intention. I don't plan to do something, Carnegie said. I either do it now or I don't do it at all. I don't hope to become great. I act great today. I don't wait for motivation. I create momentum. George Eastman, founder of Kodak, embodied this principle more dramatically than any man I studied. When I interviewed Eastman at his Rochester headquarters, he said, "Hill, I built this company because I understood that every moment of delay is a moment of lost opportunity." Eastman explained that he had entered the photography business not because he was the most skilled photographer, but because he was the most urgent. While other inventors were perfecting their techniques, Eastman was perfecting his business model. While others were waiting for ideal conditions, Eastman was creating those conditions. Speed, Eastman said, is often more important than perfection. The market rewards the man who acts quickly more than the man who acts perfectly. Timing trumps talent. Eastman showed me how he had revolutionized photography by making it accessible to ordinary people. His slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," wasn't just marketing, it was a philosophy of immediacy. "I didn't wait for photographers to become skilled," Eastman explained. "I made it possible for unskilled people to take photographs. I didn't wait for the technology to be perfect. I made imperfect technology work perfectly." But Eastman's most powerful lesson about urgency came from his personal life. When failing health made his future uncertain, Eastman chose to end his life on his own terms, leaving behind a note that said simply, "My work is done. Why wait?" This is the reality that most men never grasp. Life is not a dress rehearsal. This is not practice. This is not preparation. This is the actual performance, and the curtain is already up. Thomas Edison understood this principle in his approach to invention. When I interviewed him about his legendary work ethic, Edison said, "Hill, I work 18 hours a day, not because I love work, but because I love results. And results come from action, not from intention." Edison showed me his laboratory records documenting thousands of experiments, failures, and breakthroughs. He wasn't just prolific, he was urgent. He understood that every hour spent in delay was an hour that could have been spent in discovery. Inspiration, Edison said, is valuable only if it's followed immediately by perspiration. An idea without action is just a dream. A dream without urgency is just a fantasy. Edison explained that he had developed what he called the momentum principle, the understanding that motion creates energy and energy creates results. He didn't wait until he felt motivated to work. He worked until he felt motivated. Most men, Edison said, wait for the right moment to begin, but the right moment is always now. The right conditions are the conditions you create. The right time is the time you choose. Henry Ford applied this principle to his business philosophy. When I interviewed him about his decision to mass-produce automobiles, Ford said, "Hill, I didn't wait for the market to be ready for my product. I created the market by making my product irresistible." Ford explained that he had faced a choice: wait for perfect conditions or create those conditions through immediate action. He chose action, launching the Model T before his competitors had even finalized their designs. While other manufacturers were debating and deliberating, Ford said, "I was building and selling. While they were perfecting their plans, I was perfecting my processes. While they were waiting for certainty, I was creating certainty through action." Ford showed me his production records, demonstrating how his early entry into the market had given him an insurmountable advantage. By the time his competitors were ready to compete, Ford had already captured the market. Success, Ford said, belongs to those who act while others are still thinking. The first mover doesn't need to be perfect, he just needs to be first. Theodore Roosevelt embodied this principle in his political career. When I interviewed him about his rapid rise from governor of New York to president of the United States, Roosevelt said, "Hill, I've succeeded not because I was the most qualified, but because I was the most ready to act." Roosevelt explained that he had never waited for permission to lead. When he saw a problem, he addressed it. When he saw an opportunity, he seized it. When he saw a need, he filled it. Most men, Roosevelt said, wait for someone else to give them authority. But real authority comes from taking responsibility. Real leadership comes from acting like a leader before you're appointed to lead. Roosevelt showed me examples of initiatives he had launched without official authorization, problems he had solved without being asked, and opportunities he had created through immediate action. "I'd rather apologize for acting," Roosevelt said, "than explain why I didn't. I'd rather be criticized for doing something than ignored for doing nothing." This is what I learned from these great men. Urgency is not anxiety, it's clarity with momentum. It's not about rushing, it's about not waiting. It's not about being reckless, it's about being decisive. The men who achieve greatness are not those who wait for ideal conditions. They are those who act in imperfect conditions and improve those conditions through their actions. Here's the truth that will either motivate you or leave you exactly where you are. Every day you delay is a day you cannot reclaim. Every opportunity you postpone is an opportunity you may never see again. Every decision you avoid is a decision that life will make for you. You must develop what I call the urgency mindset. Act on inspiration immediately. When you have an idea, take the first step within 24 hours. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Start with an imperfect action. Make decisions quickly. Most decisions are reversible. The cost of a wrong decision is usually less than the cost of no decision. Start before you're ready. You'll never feel completely prepared. Readiness comes from action, not from preparation. Focus on progress, not perfection. A good plan executed immediately is better than a perfect plan executed eventually. Create deadlines for yourself. Without urgency, goals become wishes. Without deadlines, dreams become fantasies. The most dangerous phrase in the English language is someday. Someday, I'll start my business. Someday, I'll write my book. Someday, I'll get in shape. Someday, I'll tell her I love her. Someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave with you. Here's my challenge to you. Stop reading this and take immediate action on something you've been postponing. Make the call you've been avoiding. Send the email you've been composing in your head. Start the project you've been planning. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Now. Because the man who acts now while others wait will accomplish more in the next year than most men accomplish in their entire lives. Time is not your friend, it's your fire. Use it to illuminate your path and fuel your progress, or watch it burn away your potential. The choice is yours. But choose quickly, because time is choosing for you. The transformation awaits. My friend, you have now received what took me 20 years to discover. You have been given the 7 fundamental lessons that separate the successful from the struggling, the great from the mediocre, the legendary from the forgotten. These are not mere concepts to be understood. They are principles to be lived. They are not entertainment to be consumed. They are blueprints to be implemented. They are not theories to be debated. They are truths to be embodied. Let me remind you of what you now possess. You understand that your environment is your destiny, that the people, voices, and influences you allow into your life are shaping your future more powerfully than your willpower ever could. You cannot tolerate mediocre voices and expect an excellent mind. You must become the architect of your own environment, carefully selecting every influence that shapes your consciousness. You have learned that hard work alone is not enough, that the world rewards effectiveness, not just effort. You must work with leverage, not just labor. You must build systems that multiply your results, develop relationships that expand your reach, and create assets that work while you sleep. Intelligence without leverage is just sophisticated struggle. You now know that not everyone deserves access to your life, that love without alignment is sabotage disguised as support. You must limit access to protect your energy, your vision, and your evolution. Some people are chapters in your story, not characters in your destiny. You can love people deeply while limiting their influence on your decisions. You have discovered that your mind must be reprogrammed daily, that your subconscious is either working for you or against you, depending on the programming you install. You must become the programmer of your own consciousness, deliberately installing thoughts, beliefs, and identities that align with your highest potential. You understand that your choice of partner will determine your destiny, that the voice closest to you becomes the voice inside you. You must choose someone who believes in your potential before they see your performance, who speaks life into your vision rather than fear into your dreams. You have learned that you were not born to be loved, but to be remembered, that seeking universal approval is the path to universal irrelevance. You must be willing to be misunderstood, criticized, even despised in service of something greater than yourself. The approval of the masses is almost always a sign of mediocrity. You now know that you must live with urgency, that time is not your friend but your fire. You don't have someday, you have only today. Every moment of delay is a moment of lost opportunity. Action beats intention, momentum beats perfection, and now beats never. These 7 lessons are not just information, they are transformation. They are not just knowledge, they are power. They are not just understanding, they are the keys to your liberation. But knowing and doing are 2 different things. Understanding and implementing are separated by the gulf of action. You can know these principles intellectually and still live in mediocrity if you don't apply them practically. This is your moment of decision. This is your fork in the road. This is your opportunity to choose between the man you've always been and the man you're capable of becoming. Will you audit your environment and ruthlessly eliminate the influences that diminish your potential? Will you build systems and leverage instead of just working harder? Will you protect your energy by limiting access to those who don't align with your vision? Will you reprogram your mind daily with the identity of the man you're becoming? Will you choose your relationships based on compatibility of consciousness rather than convenience of circumstance? Will you embrace the discomfort of being misunderstood in service of your mission? Will you act with urgency, understanding that your time is limited and your opportunities are fleeting? The choice is yours, but choose now, because delay is a decision and inaction is an action. I have given you the map. Now you must walk the path. I have shown you the principles. Now you must live the principles. I have shared the secrets. Now you must become the secret. Because the world doesn't need another person who knows these truths. The world needs someone who lives them. The world doesn't need another dreamer. The world needs another achiever. The world doesn't need another person who talks about success. The world needs someone who demonstrates it. That person can be you. That person should be you. That person must be you. But only if you decide. Only if you commit, only if you act. The transformation begins now. Your legacy starts today. Your greatness is waiting for you to claim it. Join the Mastermind journey. My friend, if these 7 lessons have ignited something within you, if you feel that long dormant fire beginning to burn brighter, if you sense that your moment of awakening has arrived, then I invite you to take the next crucial step in your transformation. Subscribe to Napoleon Hill Mastermind Journeys right now. Click that subscribe button and join the thousands of men and women who have decided to stop accepting mediocrity and start commanding excellence. This is not just a YouTube channel, it's a movement of minds committed to unlocking their full potential. Ring the notification bell immediately, because your transformation cannot wait for convenience. Every video in this series is designed to reprogram your consciousness, elevate your standards, and accelerate your progress toward the life you were born to live. Each lesson builds upon the last, creating a complete philosophy of success that will revolutionize how you think, act, and achieve. But subscription is just the beginning. True transformation happens through implementation, through community, through the daily application of these principles in your real life. Here's my specific challenge to you, and I want you to respond in the comments below with complete honesty. What is the one limiting belief that has held you back the longest, and what specific action will you take in the next 24 hours to begin dismantling that belief? Don't give me a vague answer. Don't tell me you'll think about it or work on it. I want to know exactly what you're going to do, exactly when you're going to do it, and exactly how you're going to measure your progress. For example, I've always believed I'm not smart enough to start my own business. In the next 24 hours, I will research 3 successful entrepreneurs who started with less education than I have, and I will write down 5 specific skills I can develop this month. I've convinced myself that I'm too old to change careers. Tomorrow morning, I will contact 2 people who made major career changes after age 40 and ask them about their experience. I've accepted that I'll never be wealthy because I come from a poor family. Within 24 hours, I will read 1 chapter of a book about wealth building and write down 3 specific actions I can take this week. This is not a theoretical exercise. This is a practical commitment. And by making this commitment publicly in the comments, you're creating accountability that will drive you to follow through. Don't just watch these videos. Engage with them. Don't just consume this content. Act on it. The men and women who transform their lives aren't passive observers. They're active participants in their own evolution. Share this video immediately with someone who needs to hear these truths. Share it with the person who's been struggling with self-doubt. Share it with the friend who's been settling for less than their potential. Share it with the family member who's been stuck in patterns that don't serve them. Because greatness isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be multiplied. Success isn't a zero-sum game. The more people who succeed, the more opportunities are created for everyone. But here's my deeper challenge, the one that will separate you from the masses who collect inspiration but never transform. For the next 30 days, I want you to choose one of these 7 lessons and make it your daily focus. Not all 7 at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm. Choose the one that struck you deepest, the one that made you most uncomfortable, the one that your current self wants to avoid. If you choose environment, lesson 1, for the next 30 days, audit every relationship, every conversation, every influence in your life. Document the 5 voices that shape your thinking most powerfully. Eliminate or limit the voices that speak limitation, and actively seek out voices that speak possibility. If you choose leverage, lesson 2, for the next 30 days, stop doing things that don't multiply your results. Build one system that automates a repeated task. Delegate one responsibility that someone else can handle. Create one asset that can generate value without your constant attention. If you choose access, lesson 3, for the next 30 days, be ruthless about protecting your energy. Say no to requests that don't align with your vision. Limit time with people who drain your motivation. Increase time with people who challenge you to grow. If you choose programming, lesson 4, for the next 30 days, reprogram your mind daily with specific affirmations, visualizations, and identity statements. Create a morning routine that installs empowering thoughts. Create an evening routine that reinforces your new programming. If you choose partnership, lesson 5. For the next 30 days, evaluate your romantic relationship or your criteria for choosing one based on compatibility of consciousness. Have honest conversations about growth, vision, and mutual support. Align your partnership with your purpose. If you choose independence, lesson 6. For the next 30 days, practice making decisions based on your values rather than others' approval. Speak your truth even when it's uncomfortable. Take actions that serve your mission even when they're misunderstood. If you choose urgency, lesson 7. For the next 30 days, act immediately on every important decision. Stop saying someday and start saying today. Create deadlines for your goals and treat them as sacred commitments. Choose one lesson, focus on it intensely, document your progress, share your results. Here's what I promise you. If you choose one lesson and apply it consistently for 30 days, you will experience more growth in that month than most people experience in a year. You will develop momentum that will carry you forward for months. You will build confidence that will transform how you see yourself and how others see you. But you must choose. You must commit. You must act. In the comments below, tell me which lesson you're choosing for your 30-day focus, what specific action you'll take in the next 24 hours, how you'll measure your progress over the next 30 days. This is your moment. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to prove to yourself that you're serious about transformation, not just entertained by it. The men and women who succeed in life are not those who wait for perfect conditions. They are those who act in imperfect conditions and improve those conditions through their actions. The people who transform their lives are not those who consume more information. They are those who implement the information they already have. The individuals who build legacies are not those who dream bigger dreams. They are those who take immediate action on the dreams they already possess. Which person will you be? Don't answer with your words. Answer with your actions. Subscribe now. Ring the bell. Comment your commitment. Share this message. Choose your lesson. Take your first step. Because the world needs the person you're becoming, and that person cannot wait another day to emerge. Your transformation starts now. Your legacy begins today. Your greatness is waiting for you to claim it, but only if you choose to claim it, only if you decide to act, only if you commit to the journey of becoming everything you were born to be. The question isn't whether you can change your life. The question is whether you will. Choose greatness. Choose now. Choose to become the person you were born to be. And remember, Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But conceiving and believing without acting is just intellectual entertainment. You must conceive, believe, and achieve. You must dream and build. You must plan and execute. You must think and act. The Mastermind journey begins now. Your transformation starts today. Your legacy is waiting for you to write it. Subscribe, ring the bell, comment your commitment, share the message, choose your lesson, take immediate action. Because greatness is not a destination, it's a decision, and that decision must be made now. Your future self is counting on the decision you make in this moment. Don't let him down. The Mastermind journey awaits. Let's build your empire, one lesson at a time. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. Begin now.